Now, again, as far as through its thalamic, cerebral, autonomic nervous system endocrine connections, the hypothalamus is the principal site for regulation of little behavioral processes such as sexual response, sleeping and wakefulness. Y'all are not familiar with any of that type of thing, are you? And also emotions such as fear, anger, and pleasure. Okay? And depending on what the input is will depend upon what response you get. Okay? Hopefully you get the pleasure one, but sometimes that doesn't happen, okay? Now, as far as we said, the neural signals to the autonomic nervous system, the lateral hypothalamus projects into the lateral medulla, and that's where the cells that drive the autonomic nervous system are located. And this includes both the parasympathetic and also the sympathetic system. Okay? And as far as the parasympathetic, that mainly goes through the vagus nerve, while as your sympathetic mainly goes through the spinal cord. And with that, the hypothalamus can control heart rate, vasoconstriction, vasodilatation, digestion, vomition, sweating, shivering, and there's not enough room for everything else. So basically, almost all the body systems. So does everybody get a feel for how important the hypothalamus is? Mm-hmm. Pretty much so, huh? Now again, as we say, the endocrine signals that go to the pituitary, and that you have large hypothalamic cells around the third ventricle. They send their axons directly to the posterior pituitary, so you get very long axons. And down there, the axons terminate, terminals release oxytocin and vasopressin in that posterior pituitary. And that's why that is called a neuroendocrine type thing. Okay? Now, smaller cells in the hypothalamus send their axons to the base of the pituitary, and these release their hormones into the vascular network there, goes down and surrounds the cells in the anterior pituitary, and then that stimulates those cells to secrete whatever they're supposed to secrete down there. So with this, you know we said the pituitary is the master gland of the body. That's what I tell you, the hypothalamus controls the pituitary. I told you all the other day, the hypothalamus is the queen. Okay? Pituitary may be the king, thinks it runs everything, right? But who really runs it? The hypothalamus. Okay, and again, as we say, it does have direct innervation of gland cells for the adrenal medulla. Okay, and remember, it's synapting on those endocrine cells in the adrenal medulla, which causes them to secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay, and again, as far as your neurosecretory cells, the hormones that it's going to secrete, they're synthesized in the soma and the cell body. They're transported down the axon, and then they store it into axonal endings. Okay, and that's the same way with both the neurohypophysis and with down into the adrenal medulla. Okay, because would you want to have to wait to the fear and flight type thing? That's going to cause release of epinephrine, right? Would you want to have to wait until the hypothalamus up here says, well, I got to make this stuff and send it down there so that we can release this and so we can run? That might be a little too late, right? So it's got to have stored forms in there, and stored in the axonal endings. Okay, so this is just showing you the synthesis of hormones by the hypothalamic nerve. If you have stimulatory and inhibiting hormones, in other words, those that are going mainly to the posterior pituitary, they'll go into the pituitary portal vessel circulation that goes down, surrounds those cells down there into the anterior pituitary, causes those cells to secrete their hormones, and then they go out into the surrounding tissue and picked up by the general circulation, and then they're carried down to their target organs when they get down there. As far as those that go into the neurohypophysis, again, the neuron cell body up in the paraventricular and superoptic nuclei start the pre-hormone type thing. As it goes down, it's going to go down to the axon, and it's going to be converted into active hormone, and then it is going to be stored there in the axonal endings, and then when there's stimulation, it's going to release them in the general circulation. It'll pick them up. So that's the whole structure that's going on. And this is just a diagram showing you that. You can see all those different colors down there. Those represent the different secretory cells in the pituitary gland, the anterior pituitary. And you can see in the posterior pituitary, the neurons up at the hypothalamus sending their axons down, and they're just sitting and terminating down there in the posterior pituitary. Whereas if you see on the other side, the neurons up there secreting, the axons are ending on the microvasculature, and that capillary bed is then going to carry those hormones down, and that's going to stimulate the response as far as the anterior pituitary is concerned. Okay? And so that's basically what's going on. But basically in the end, they're going to get into the general circulation in all instances. These are just, I found these diagrams later, so I just put those in here this year, but just showing you, I think they're a little prettier than that last one, a little more realistic. But it just shows you, as far as you're looking at here, which one are we looking at here? Which one do we know this one is? Is this anterior or posterior pituitary? That's the anterior, because you can see the vascularity and everything in there. And it shows a little better how the vessels, those capillaries surround those endocrine cells that are in the anterior pituitary so that you can have direct stimulation of them by these stimulatory or inhibitory hormones, whichever, that are coming down from the hypothalamus. And this is just a diagram showing you what's going on with the posterior pituitary, with the neurohypophysis, and how the axons come all the way down, and then they terminate, and then the vessels surround them so that when they're stimulated, releases it into the blood vessels. And this is out here, all the textbook is recommended. I don't require a textbook since I give you all the notes in there, but sometimes it's good to have the textbook, and this is from that recommended textbook right here, basically showing you the same thing with explanations and everything about what's going on. Now, let's look at the hormones of the hypothalamus and neurohypophysis. And what's a tropic hormone mean? Right, axon endocrine gland who causes secretion of another hormone, right? And so your hypothalamic trophic hormones are, as I said, mostly peptides. So they're about from 3, which is the smallest, that's going to be the thyroid-releasing hormone, and also your catecholamine, to about 44 amino acids in length. And all of them are released into the blood and transported directly to the anterior lobe of the pituitary, and then that's where they exert their effect. Again, the ones that come from the posterior pituitary, they are oxytocin and vasopressin, and they're both octapeptides. And what does that mean? How many peptides I got in?
8.
8, very good. Neurophysis is a transport carrier that is in that axon. It takes that preformed hormone, and as it's moving down, it becomes active hormone to get it down to the axon. Okay, so it has to have a carrier. And one of the problems, there are some conditions where neurophysis or physin is not enough of, congenital conditions like that. What do you think that's going to do to hypothalamic posterior pituitary function? Go down, and they have a lot of problems with, you can't retain water, so you can get severe dehydration of that, get renal failure, and everything else from that. Okay, now this is a very important diagram. Did I have to say that again? And whenever I tell you there's a very important diagram, that may mean you may see it again. Okay? And that means on exams or something like that, or some modification of it, okay? But this again is just summarizing what we just said as far as your hypothalamus. You can see over here on the left, the direct release of the oxytocin and vasopressin down to the posterior pituitary axons down there. And you can see all the different hormones that are secreted as far as the anterior pituitary is concerned. And you need to know what the abbreviations stand for, okay, and what cell, what their major function is as we do this, okay? And if we go through here.
Question?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's already up there.
Okay.
What the abbreviations stand for?
PRF, you had a question about it.
All right, so as far as the releasing hormone and factors, we have TRH. What do you think that stands for?
Thyroid.
Thyrotropin releasing hormone. What's thyrotropin?
Thyroid?
Thyrotropin is another name for thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH. So what do you think TRH causes the release of? TSH. So what cells in the anterior pituitary are its target? Thyrotropes. We try to name things like a thiotrope secretes TSH, okay? And it's thiotropin, you know, you're just going to stimulate the thyrotropes, all right? We have gonadotropin releasing hormone. That's GnRH. What do you think that's going to stimulate? It's going to stimulate the gonadotropes, right? What are the gonadotropes in the pituitary going to secrete? MSH and LH. All right. We have your growth hormone releasing hormone. Now, don't get those two confused with the abbreviations. See, growth hormone releasing hormone is GH, gonadotropic, and is GN, so don't get those two confused. And what do you think, what cells do you think your growth hormone releasing hormone affects? Somatotropes, which produce what? Somatostatin, which is also known as growth hormone. Okay? Now, then we have the prolactin releasing hormone, and there's a question mark. Anybody know why there's a question mark?
They don't know what.
They're not real sure that's not the same thing as TRH. They've not really figured that out yet. But they still put it up there, and what would prolactin cause? Lactation, production of milk, this type of thing. But they still haven't convinced themselves it's a unique hormone, or if it's just the same thing as TRH. Okay. How about melanocyte stimulating hormone releasing factor? What do you think that's going to stimulate? MSH, which is melanocyte. It says the name for it is melanocyte stimulating hormone. So MSH is melanocyte stimulating hormone. What's that going to do? Stimulate the melanocytes to do what? To spread out and produce melanin. Okay. So those are the main releasing hormones, but we also again have inhibiting hormones. And somatostatin. I think that's a pretty powerful hormone. What's somato stand for? The body. Statin means stop activity. So you think that's going to be a pretty strong, widespread hormone? And with somatostatin has inhibitory effects upon a lot of different types of cellular functions, this type of thing. We all know about dopamine, right? Now, dopamine can be inhibiting or it can be stimulating depending on where it's involved with, as far as the nervous system and stuff is concerned. And then we have melanocyte stimulating hormone inhibiting factor. So what's it going to inhibit? The MSH production, so it's going to inhibit melanocyte activation. Okay? So they kind of name these things so that they make sense. All right? And this is just a table that summarizes all that, and it's a nice table. It's a really nice, figure to put into an exam, and you have little blanks in there, and ask what they are. Do I have to say that again? No.
Sure, go ahead.
But what you really need now, these are going to be peptide type hormones, but the main thing you need to know is what these hormones effect is, what they do. Okay, and that's summarized as far as this table is concerned. And you look at there, you see down there in the prolactin releasing factor, where they say under there it may be same as TRH. Again, they're not positive. Okay, so let's look at thyrotropin releasing hormone, or TRH. It is, again, the smallest of the peptides. It only has 3 peptides in it. Okay? It's basically glutamine, histamine, and proline what makes it up. So it's a very small tripeptide. But it's very, very important. It stimulates the release of TSH and probably prolactin from the anterior lobe of the pituitary. Now, it's basically a very widespread neurotransmitter or neuromodulator within the brain spinal cord also. So it has neuronal functions too, not just causing TSH release. They think it helps to regulate the body temperature. It can also have some effects upon physiological and behavioral activities and things. They've also been using a lot of research with it, found that and it's not so much a may anymore. They have seen good results that it's a therapeutic value for spinal cord injury in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or Lou Gehrig's disease. Y'all heard that, right? And it actually seems to help heal a lot of the neuronal damage in this type of thing, in these types of things. Now, deficiencies of TRH, what kind of endocrine disorder are you going to see with deficiencies of TRH? What are you not going to produce? TSH, you don't produce TSH, what again are you not going to produce from that? Thyroid hormone. So this will produce hypothyroidism, but what level? What's primary hypothyroidism? That's the thyroid. What's secondary hypothyroidism? Pituitary. So what's tertiary hypothyroidism? It's the hypothalamus. It's one of the rarest, thank goodness, because you think that some injury is just going to take out the thyrotropin releasing hormone, but probably damage everything up there. So usually it may be actually more common than we think, but the animal doesn't live long enough to get seen or diagnosed or anything. Okay, now your gonadotropic releasing hormone, or GnRH, It's also a peptide. It's still not very big, but it's only 10 amino acids, but it's bigger as far as your than the 3 amino acid size of your TRH. And it functions to stimulate the release of FSH and LH from the anterior lobe of the pituitary. So it's going to be the gonadotropes down there. And it has a very pronounced pulsatile secretion. In other words, it's doing this, and that's what these hormones do, right? Sex hormones do. And if they're, if you have abnormalities in them, it gives you a lot of problems, subnormal fertility and all this type of thing. Very often, you see more often probably in small ruminants, and they just don't breed. You can see problems with this. And what's that going to do to the economics of the farmer that's got them? Down. Okay. Now, increased physical training may result in hyposecretion of gonadotropin releasing hormone. What's one of the big problems they have with, you have these thoroughbreds, that they're champion thoroughbreds, and what do you want to do with a champion thoroughbred? Breed it. And they take them off the track, and it might be over a year before they can recover from the exercise that's caused this, loss of hormone to get normal again. Okay? In humans, synthetic agonists of gonadotropin releasing hormone are used to treat prostatic cancer. You're also using them a little more often now in dogs with prostatic cancer.
Dr. Graham,
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about horses and breeding. Is there a way that you could speed up the process medically?
You can do it, but there's a lot of risk in there. And that sometimes they can use some sex hormones and things to try to help regulate, but one of the problems is a very individualistic thing. So you may end up actually doing the opposite when you do it. So you got to be very careful, you got to monitor it very closely. But they do that. Okay, and one of the things that they can do is to, before they start advertising, breeding and stuff, is allow the animal to rest for a few months, and then usually they'll spring back all right. Okay, but again, one of the most dangerous treatments is hormonal treatment. So you've got to be very careful with it, because one of the problems are hormones only going to do one thing, or they often affect a lot of different things. You got to be careful with it. Okay. Okay, now your growth hormone releasing hormone, or GHRH, it's a mixture of various peptides. In other words, it's not just one. There's various ones of them. And they vary from about 37 to 44 amino acids. Now, the same cell can secrete many of them. It's not just one particular cell secretes this one or that, but together they have the same functions. So that's why they're all classified as growth hormone. And they will stimulate cells in the anterior lobe of the pituitary to secrete your growth hormone. Now, your growth hormone itself is just a single hormone, okay? But the stimulatory factor is different. And then one reason that may be is that if you have various ones, you don't risk losing something and not getting growth hormone release, because can loss of growth hormone cause a bunch of problems? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. So its secretion is stimulated by things like stress, including physical exercise. So you go out there and I haven't told you all very much, but you've asked my seniors and stuff that what do I always warn you about exercise? It can kill you. Okay? So you got to do it in moderation. All right. That's why I don't worry about doing so much of it. But it's so it can in other words, if you have someone that's been out there doing a lot of exercise and everything, can that retard the growth of some things and stuff? All right, so you got to be careful with it. Excess production of your gonadotropin hormone releasing or your growth hormone releasing hormone is associated with hamartomas, pancreatic islet tumors, and it can also lead to that condition called acromegaly. Okay, and we'll go through all these different problems when we get into some cases and stuff like that. Okay, your corticotropic releasing hormone is CRH. It's about 41 amino acids, and it acts on the corticotropes mainly in the anterior lobe of the pituitary, and it's going to synthesize ACTH. And what's ACTH going to stimulate? The adrenal. The vesiculata or reticularis predominantly of the adrenal cortex to secrete your glucocorticoids and also some of your androgens and sex hormones down there. There are many factors, both neurogenic and hormonal, that regulate the secretion of this, and that's why one of the most common endocrine disorders in animals is involving the adrenal gland. because of all this. It's also synthesized by the placenta, and it seems to be very much involved in determining the duration of pregnancy. Okay, and that's one of the reasons if you've got a problem with these cells that secrete this hormone, you can have prolongation for months. And believe me, you don't want to have to do that. Okay, as far as that is concerned.
So if the animal consumes, for example, the plant that we were talking last time, Veratrum californium, it will specifically attack this part, the cortical trophy?
Well, it can affect, that plant toxin can affect numerous things, but one of its targets is that hormone. And one of the problems with that, like I say, remember in that case that there was, animal went way past the normal parturition period and when it had this monster type thing? And that's because you're inhibiting this normal activity of the fetal glands also, as well as the placental glands and the mother causing the problems. Okay, one more we're going to have to break for today. Somatostatin, it's a mixture of two peptides, one's 14 amino acids, the other is 28. And it functions that basically acts on the anterior lobe of the pituitary to inhibit the release of growth hormone and thyroid stimulating hormone. Can that have some very significant effects upon the body, both the developing and all the adult animals and things? It also acts on the pancreatic islets to block insulin and glucagon secretion. Can that be a little bit detrimental?
Mm-hmm.
But again, can it also maybe try to help out? What if the animal is starting to develop insulinoma, it's producing excessive insulin? Would this kick in and maybe slow down the progression a little bit, and hopefully you can diagnose it before it gets too far? So in other words, somatostatin is not all bad. It has its necessaries. It also